The girl everyone laughed at. Isabella Romano had learned long ago that people judged her before she even opened her mouth. At 26, she was curvy, soft-spoken, and worked double shifts as a waitress inside La Stella d'Oro, one of the most exclusive Italian restaurants on the Sicilian coast. Wealthy politicians, celebrities, business tycoons, and occasionally men far more dangerous than all three combined filled the dining room every night. Isabella carried trays, smiled politely, and tried not to notice the looks people gave her. Some pitied her, others mocked her. A few pretended she didn't exist at all. Tonight was no different. Careful, one of the other waitresses laughed as Isabella carried a tray of wine glasses. If you eat any more desserts from the kitchen, we'll have to widen the aisles. The women near the service station laughed. Isabella forced a smile she didn't feel and continued walking. Experience had taught her that responding only made things worse. Behind the kitchen counter, her ex-boyfriend Marco leaned against the wall, scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up. 6 months earlier, he had left her for a thinner hostess and somehow still acted as though Isabella had inconvenienced him. "Table 12 needs service," he muttered. "Try not to embarrass the restaurant." Isabella bit down on the reply forming in her throat. Rent was due next week. Pride didn't pay bills. She picked up the order and moved toward the dining room. The restaurant glowed with golden lights reflecting across polished marble floors. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. Soft violin music drifted through the air. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt expensive, yet Isabella noticed something strange immediately. Several security men in black suits had appeared near the entrance. Not restaurant security, different. Professional. Dangerous. The room's atmosphere shifted subtly as conversations quieted. Heads turned. People noticed. Then he entered. Matteo de Luca. Even Isabella knew the name. Everyone in Sicily knew the name. Officially, Matteo was a billionaire investor with international shipping companies, luxury hotels, and private holdings across Europe. Unofficially, rumors followed him everywhere. Rumors of power, rumors of violence, rumors that entire organizations moved when he made a phone call. At 38, Matteo possessed the kind of presence that silenced rooms without effort. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark-tailored suit, cold gray eyes. Men respected him. Enemies feared him. Women stared. Matteo entered the restaurant accompanied by 2 bodyguards and a young boy around 8 years old. The contrast was striking. The child wore a navy sweater and looked more interested in the dessert display than the powerful man beside him. Isabella found herself smiling despite everything. The boy looked normal. Curious. Alive. Unlike most wealthy children she served. The hostess immediately rushed forward. "Mr. De Luca, your private table is ready." Matteo nodded once. No smile. No unnecessary words. The boy tugged gently on his sleeve. "Dad, can I get chocolate cake later?" For the first time, something softened in Matteo's expression. Only slightly, but Isabella saw it. "If you finish dinner." The boy grinned triumphantly. Isabella felt a strange warmth watching them. Then Marco appeared beside her. "Stop staring and work." She looked away immediately. The next hour passed in a blur of orders, wine service, and demanding customers. Isabella barely noticed time moving until a scream shattered the restaurant. Every head turned. A glass crashed onto the floor. Someone shouted for help. Isabella spun around toward Matteo's table. The young boy had collapsed. Panic erupted instantly. Customers stood. Waiters froze. The child gasped desperately for air while knocking over a chair. Matteo was already beside him. "Luca!" The terror in his voice transformed him from an untouchable billionaire into a father. Luca clawed at his throat. His face was turning red, then purple. Isabella's eyes widened. She recognized the signs immediately. Years earlier, her younger brother had suffered severe food allergies. She had seen this before. Everyone else stood frozen. Isabella moved. "He's choking?" Someone shouted. "No," Isabella said instantly. "Allergic reaction." She dropped her tray and ran across the dining room. Security stepped forward immediately. Matteo looked ready to break someone's neck. "Get away from him." Isabella ignored the warning. "What did he eat?" Matteo hesitated. A dessert sample. Isabella looked at the table. Pistachio garnish. Her stomach dropped. Does he have a nut allergy? Matteo's expression changed. Yes. Luca struggled to breathe. The restaurant descended into chaos. Isabella knelt beside him. Where's his EpiPen? Matteo immediately searched his son's bag. Nothing. One of the bodyguards checked. Nothing. Matteo's face went pale. It should be here. Luca's breathing worsened. Isabella made a decision. The pharmacy across the street carries emergency injectors. Matteo looked at her. How long? 3 minutes if I run. Go. Isabella sprinted before he finished speaking. The restaurant doors flew open. She crossed the street without caring about traffic. People shouted behind her. She ignored them. The pharmacy door nearly came off its hinges when she entered. Less than 2 minutes later, she returned carrying the injector. Luca's condition had deteriorated further. Matteo dropped beside his son immediately. Isabella handed over the medication. Now, the injection was administered. Seconds felt like hours. Then gradually, slowly, Luca's breathing improved. Color returned to his face. The entire restaurant seemed to exhale at once. Matteo remained kneeling beside his son. His hands shook slightly. Isabella noticed. So did nobody else, because everyone was staring at the billionaire. No one expected powerful men to look afraid. Yet fear filled Matteo's eyes as he pulled Luca into his arms. The boy whispered weakly, "I'm okay, Dad." Matteo closed his eyes briefly. Relief hit him hard enough to be visible. Several minutes later, paramedics arrived. They examined Luca and confirmed he would recover fully. The restaurant returned to life slowly. Customers resumed talking. Staff resumed moving. Yet something had changed. Matteo stood and turned toward Isabella. The entire room went silent again. "You saved my son's life." Isabella immediately shook her head. "I just knew what to do." "You saved my son's life," Matteo repeated. The words carried weight, finality, truth. Isabella suddenly became very aware of everyone watching. Marco, the waitresses, the manager, the customers, the bodyguards. Matteo's gaze never left her. "What is your name?" "Isabella. Isabella Romano." For some reason, hearing him say her name felt dangerous. Then Luca appeared beside his father and tugged gently on Isabella's sleeve. "Thank you." The small voice almost broke her heart. She smiled. "You're welcome." Luca studied her for a second. Then he did something unexpected. He hugged her. The entire restaurant stared. Matteo stared too. Isabella froze before carefully returning the hug. Luca stepped back and smiled. "You're nice." The simple statement somehow affected Matteo more than everything else that night. Isabella noticed the look exchanged between father and son. She didn't understand it, but it mattered. Moments later, the restaurant manager rushed forward, smiling nervously. "Mr. De Luca, we're so grateful everything is okay." Matteo ignored him completely. His attention remained on Isabella. "You're finished for the evening." Isabella blinked. "What?" The manager laughed awkwardly. "Actually, she still has 4 hours left. She's finished." Matteo's voice remained calm. The manager stopped speaking immediately. Isabella frowned. "I don't understand." Matteo looked toward Luca, then back at her. "My son wants you to come with us." Silence. Complete silence. Isabella stared. The manager stared. Marco stared. Even the bodyguards looked surprised. Luca nodded enthusiastically. "Can she?" Isabella laughed nervously. "I can't just leave work." Matteo's expression didn't change. "Yes, you can." Something in his tone made everyone in the restaurant realize a simple truth. Matteo De Luca was a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. And at that moment, for reasons Isabella couldn't begin to understand, the most powerful man in Sicily had decided he wasn't ready to let her leave. The boy who refused to let her go, Isabella Romano, had spent most of her life being ignored, which was why standing in front of a fleet of black luxury vehicles while one of the most powerful men in Sicily waited for her answer felt completely unreal. The restaurant staff stared through the front windows. Marco looked as if someone had punched him. The manager appeared one heartbeat away from a nervous breakdown. An 8-year-old Luca de Luca stood beside his father with hopeful eyes that made refusing almost impossible. "Please?" Luca asked again. Isabella laughed nervously. "Your father already scares me enough. Don't team up with him." To her surprise, Luca grinned. Matteo did not. "No one is forcing you," Matteo said. The statement might have sounded more convincing if 6 armed bodyguards weren't standing behind him. Isabella folded her arms. "Then why does this feel like an abduction?" For the first time, something resembling amusement flickered across Matteo's face. It vanished almost immediately. "Dinner. That's all." Luca immediately shook his head. "And dessert." Matteo sighed. "And dessert." Isabella looked toward the restaurant. The manager was already nodding enthusiastically. Clearly, her shift had ended whether she agreed or not. "One dinner," she said finally. Luca cheered. Matteo simply opened the rear vehicle door. 30 minutes later, Isabella understood why rumors surrounded Matteo de Luca. The estate overlooking the Sicilian coast looked less like a home and more like a private kingdom. Massive iron gates, armed security, endless gardens, ocean cliffs, marble fountains. The property stretched so far she couldn't even see where it ended. "People actually live here?" she asked quietly. Luca nodded proudly. "Me and Dad." The answer surprised her. No mention of a mother. Before she could ask, the vehicle stopped. Servants appeared immediately. Security moved into position. Everything operated with the precision of a military installation. Matteo exited first. Luca grabbed Isabella's hand before she could follow. "Come on." She barely had time to protest before being pulled toward the mansion entrance. The interior somehow exceeded the exterior. Crystal chandeliers, white marble floors, massive staircases, priceless artwork. Every surface screamed wealth. Yet despite the luxury, the house felt strangely empty. Too quiet, too formal, too controlled. Like nobody laughed here. Luca immediately began changing that. "This way." He dragged Isabella through several hallways before Matteo finally intervened. "Luca." The boy stopped. "What? She hasn't agreed to move in." Isabella nearly choked. "Move in?" Luca looked genuinely confused. "She's not?" Matteo pinched the bridge of his nose. Isabella suddenly felt much better about her own life choices. Dinner was served on a terrace overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. The sunset painted the water gold while servants moved silently around the table. Luca sat beside Isabella instead of his father. That decision appeared entirely intentional. Matteo noticed. Isabella noticed. Luca definitely noticed. "This is weird," Isabella said quietly. Matteo looked up from his wine glass. "Which part?" "The part where I'm eating dinner with a billionaire who owns enough land to invade a small country." Luca laughed. Matteo's mouth twitched slightly. "It's only one country." Isabella stared. Matteo remained completely serious. Then Luca started laughing harder. A few seconds later, Isabella realized Matteo had made a joke. A terrible joke. But still a joke. The discovery felt more shocking than the armed guards. The evening progressed more naturally than Isabella expected. Luca talked constantly. School. Football. Favorite movies. His dog. His dislike of vegetables. Somehow he managed to reveal more personal information in 20 minutes than Matteo had revealed all evening. Eventually, Isabella looked toward Matteo. "Does he ever stop talking?" Matteo took a sip of wine. "No, Dad talks less than everyone." Luca lowered his voice dramatically. "Sometimes I think he's a robot." Isabella laughed. Matteo looked unimpressed. "I'm sitting right here." Luca shrugged. That's exactly what a robot would say. For the first time all evening, Matteo actually smiled. A real smile. Small, rare, gone almost instantly. Yet Isabella saw it. The sight affected her more than she wanted to admit. Because beneath the power, beneath the reputation, beneath the cold exterior, There was a father trying very hard to raise a child alone. And suddenly Matteo seemed much more human than the rumors suggested. The moment shattered when one of the security men approached the table. "Sir." Matteo immediately became serious. "What?" The guard leaned closer and spoke quietly. Whatever he said caused Matteo's expression to darken. Isabella noticed immediately. So did Luca. The boy's smile faded. Matteo stood. "Excuse me." He followed the guard toward the mansion. Luca watched him disappear, then looked down at his plate. The change was immediate. "Is he okay?" Isabella asked softly. Luca shrugged. "Work." The single word carried far more sadness than an 8-year-old should have understood. Isabella hesitated before speaking again. "Your mother?" Luca stared at the ocean. For several seconds he said nothing. "She died." Isabella's heart sank instantly. "I'm sorry." Luca nodded. "I don't remember much." The honesty hurt. Isabella reached across the table and squeezed his hand gently. "She would be proud of you." Luca looked at her. Really looked at her. Then smiled slightly. "Dad likes you." Isabella nearly dropped her fork. "What? He doesn't invite people here. Your father barely tolerates me." Luca shook his head confidently. "No, he likes you." Before Isabella could respond, Matteo returned. Yet, something felt different. Tension followed him. Anger. Concern. Both. He sat down without touching his food. Luca noticed immediately. "Bad work?" Matteo looked at his son. Some of the tension faded. A little. Isabella remained silent. Not her business. Not her world. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something serious had happened. Later that evening, after dessert, Isabella prepared to leave, or at least she tried to. Luca immediately protested. "Already? It's late. You can come back tomorrow." Isabella smiled. "I have a job." Luca turned toward his father. "Hire her." Isabella laughed. Matteo didn't. The silence lasted slightly too long. "Dad?" Luca asked hopefully. Matteo looked at Isabella. Isabella looked back. Then Matteo did something that made the entire terrace go silent. "Maybe." Isabella blinked. "Excuse me?" Matteo remained calm. "You're observant." "That's not a job qualification." "You recognized anaphylaxis before anyone else." "Because my brother had allergies." Matteo continued as though she hadn't interrupted. "You noticed details nobody else saw tonight." Isabella frowned. "What details?" Matteo leaned back slightly. "The pistachio garnish." She froze. Matteo saw it immediately. "You noticed something." Isabella hesitated. Maybe she should remain silent. Smart people remained silent around men like Matteo de Luca. Yet Luca almost died because of that dessert. Finally she spoke. "The restaurant doesn't use pistachios in that dessert." Matteo's eyes narrowed instantly. "What?" Isabella swallowed. "I work there every day. The garnish should have been shaved white chocolate." Silence settled across the terrace. Luca looked confused. Matteo looked dangerous. "You're certain?" Isabella nodded slowly. "Yes." The atmosphere changed. Completely. Matteo stood. Every trace of warmth disappeared. The Mafia boss returned. The powerful man from the rumors. The man people feared. One phone call later, security teams started moving across the property. Orders were given. Vehicles prepared. Men armed themselves. Isabella watched the transformation with growing unease. "What did I do?" she asked quietly. Matteo looked at her. "You may have just told me, 'Someone tried to kill my son.'" The words hit like a physical blow. Luca's face went pale. Isabella's stomach twisted. Suddenly, the allergic reaction no longer looked like an accident. Suddenly, the missing injector seemed much more suspicious. Suddenly, everything felt dangerous. Matteo stared toward the dark ocean for several seconds, thinking, calculating, planning. Then his attention returned to Isabella. You're not going home tonight. Isabella blinked. What? If you're right? Someone tampered with the dessert. His voice remained calm, which means they know Luca survived. The implication settled heavily between them. Matteo continued. And the only witness who noticed the garnish difference is you. Isabella's blood ran cold. Luca immediately moved closer to her. You can stay here. Matteo nodded once. Final. Certain. Not a suggestion. Isabella looked from the powerful Mafia boss to the boy she had saved. Then toward the dark Sicilian coastline beyond the terrace. A few hours earlier, she had been serving wine and avoiding insults from coworkers. Now she was standing inside a private fortress under Mafia protection because someone might want her dead. And deep inside the mansion, security cameras had already captured something even more disturbing. A kitchen employee at La Stella d'Oro secretly meeting with a man connected to Matteo de Luca's enemies. Neither Matteo nor Isabella knew it yet. But the attempt on Luca's life had only been the beginning. The woman in the painting. Isabella Romano barely slept. The guest suite she had been given inside Matteo de Luca's mansion was larger than her entire apartment, yet comfort proved impossible when armed guards stood outside her door, and someone might have tried to murder an 8-year-old boy. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Luca gasping for breath on the restaurant floor. Every time she drifted off, she remembered Matteo's expression when he realized the allergic reaction might not have been an accident. Fear looked different on powerful men. More dangerous. More personal. Sometime after midnight, Isabella finally gave up on sleep. She slipped from bed and crossed the room toward the balcony. The Sicilian coastline stretched beneath the moonlight. Waves crashed against the cliffs below. Everything looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Her thoughts drifted back to the restaurant. The pistachio garnish. The missing injector. The suspicious timing. None of it felt random anymore. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Isabella froze. Who knocked on doors in a mansion protected like a military base? The knock came again. Carefully, she approached and opened the door. Luca stood outside wearing dinosaur pajamas. Isabella blinked. What are you doing awake? Luca held up a pillow. Bad dream. Her heart immediately melted. Come in. 5 minutes later, they sat on the enormous couch overlooking the sea. Luca hugged the pillow tightly. Dad gets bad dreams too. Isabella looked surprised. Really? Luca nodded. Sometimes he walks around the house all night. The answer felt strangely sad. Does he talk about them? Luca laughed softly. Dad doesn't talk about anything. Isabella couldn't argue with that. Before she could say more, footsteps appeared in the hallway. Matteo emerged a moment later. His hair was slightly messy, his tie was gone. The expensive suit jacket had disappeared. Somehow he looked even more intimidating. I should have known, he muttered. Luca grinned. Couldn't sleep. Matteo looked at Isabella. You either? She shook her head. No. Silence followed. Then Matteo did something unexpected. Come with me. Isabella frowned. Where? Library. Luca immediately jumped off the couch. Can I come? Matteo sighed. Apparently, the mansion's library occupied an entire wing. Floor-to-ceiling shelves covered the walls. Ancient books filled every available space. A fireplace burned quietly in one corner. The room felt less like a library and more like a museum. Matteo walked directly toward a large desk. Several photographs already lay waiting there. Isabella noticed immediately. Investigation. Evidence. Matteo had been working. What is this? She asked. Matteo picked up one of the photographs. Security footage from the restaurant. Isabella moved closer. Luca climbed into a chair. The image showed the kitchen approximately 20 minutes before the allergic reaction. Employees moved around preparing orders. Waiters carried trays. Chefs worked stations. At first, everything looked normal. Then Matteo slid another photograph across the desk. Isabella stared. One of the kitchen assistants stood beside the dessert station. A second man approached him briefly. The stranger wore a baseball cap and dark jacket. They exchanged something, then separated. Isabella's stomach tightened. Who is he? Matteo's expression darkened. That's the problem. He placed another photograph on the desk. The stranger's face became clearer. Luca couldn't understand what he was seeing, but Isabella immediately noticed Matteo's reaction. Recognition. You know him. Matteo nodded once. His name is Enzo Bellini. The room became quiet. Should I know who that is? Isabella asked. No. Matteo's voice remained calm. Too calm. But he works for a man who has wanted me dead for 15 years. A chill traveled down her spine. Luca looked between them. Bad guy? Matteo nodded. Very bad guy. Isabella stared at the photograph again. The situation suddenly felt much larger than one restaurant employee accepting a bribe. Someone connected to Matteo's enemies had entered the restaurant. Someone connected to Matteo's enemies had approached the dessert station. Someone connected to Matteo's enemies appeared shortly before Luca nearly died. Matteo studied the photographs for several seconds. Then another realization seemed to strike him. His eyes shifted toward Isabella. What? She asked. Matteo didn't answer immediately. The waiter who delivered the dessert. Isabella thought back. Her memory had always been unusually strong. Faces. Details. Small observations. They stayed with her, not Marco. Matteo waited. Isabella closed her eyes briefly, reconstructing the evening. No. Her eyes opened. It was someone else. Matteo leaned forward slightly. Who? A woman. Isabella frowned. Dark hair. Green earrings. She wasn't one of our normal servers. Silence. Matteo exchanged a look with one of the security officers standing nearby. Find her. The man nodded and left immediately. Isabella blinked. That's it? What? You just send people? Matteo looked genuinely confused. Yes. And they find her? Usually. Luca laughed. Dad always finds people. Isabella was beginning to understand why rumors followed this family. An hour later, while Luca finally slept in a chair near the fireplace, Isabella remained in the library reviewing additional photographs with Matteo. The strange part was how comfortable the silence felt. Matteo rarely wasted words. Isabella usually talked too much when nervous. Yet somehow the quiet between them wasn't awkward. It felt easy. Dangerous realization. She pushed it away immediately. Then her attention landed on something hanging above the fireplace. A portrait. Large, elegant, old. Isabella froze. Matteo noticed. What? Slowly she stood. The painting showed a woman, perhaps 25 years old, dark chestnut hair, brown eyes, soft facial features, a gentle smile. Isabella's pulse accelerated. Who is she? Matteo turned toward the portrait. For the first time all evening, genuine surprise appeared on his face. My mother, Isabella, couldn't breathe for a second. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Not identical, but enough. Similar eyes. Similar hair. Similar smile. Similar face shape. Matteo noticed it too. Interesting. Isabella looked from the painting to him. Interesting? You look alike. Her stomach flipped unexpectedly. That's ridiculous. A little. Yet he kept staring. The similarity wasn't exact. Still, something about it felt unsettling. Familiar. Almost meaningful. Before either could explore the thought further, Dante entered the library. The security chief looked grim. Boss. Matteo stood immediately. What? Dante placed a folder on the desk. We found the waitress. Silence. Matteo opened the folder. Isabella watched his expression harden with every page. What happened? She asked quietly. Dante answered. She's dead. The words hit the room like a gunshot. Matteo slowly closed the folder. Isabella's blood ran cold. Dead? Dante nodded. Car accident outside Palermo 2 hours ago. Matteo's eyes narrowed dangerously. Accident? Dante's expression suggested he didn't believe it either. No. Silence filled the library. Isabella suddenly felt very small, very vulnerable. Someone tampered with Luca's dessert, Someone removed the injector. Someone involved had just died before questioning could begin. This wasn't random. It was organized. Planned. Deliberate. Matteo seemed to reach the same conclusion. They're cleaning up. Dante nodded. Yes. Matteo looked toward the sleeping Luca, then toward Isabella. His gaze lingered slightly longer than expected. Calculation moved behind those gray eyes. Strategy. Protection. Decision. Finally he spoke. You're staying here. Isabella blinked. Again with that? This isn't a request anymore. She crossed her arms. You can't keep me prisoner. Matteo stepped closer. Not threatening, just serious. Someone murdered a witness tonight. Isabella opened her mouth. Closed it again. He wasn't wrong. Matteo continued. You noticed details everyone else missed. That's not a superpower. Apparently it is. She wanted to argue. Wanted to insist her life remained her own. Yet fear crept into her chest. Because a woman connected to the case was already dead. Matteo seemed to see the realization settling in. His voice softened slightly. Stay until we know who's behind this. Isabella looked away. Toward the portrait above the fireplace. Toward Luca sleeping peacefully. Toward the endless darkness beyond the mansion windows. Finally she nodded once. Matteo relaxed slightly. Barely noticeable. Yet she saw it. Then Dante spoke again. There's one more thing. Matteo looked up. What? Dante handed him another photograph. Matteo stared. His expression changed instantly. Isabella felt her stomach drop. What is it? Matteo turned the image around. Isabella froze. The photograph showed the mysterious woman from the restaurant speaking with Enzo Bellini. But that wasn't the shocking part. Standing behind them, partially hidden by shadows, was a third figure. A woman. Elegant. Blonde. Wealthy. Isabella recognized her immediately. Everyone in Sicily did. Sofia Moretti, Matteo's former fiancée, and the woman who disappeared 3 years ago without explanation. The room fell silent. Matteo stared at the image. His jaw tightened. Dante spoke quietly. Looks like she's back. And suddenly the attempted murder of Matteo's son became far more personal than anyone had imagined. The woman he never forgot, Sofia Moretti's face on the photograph, changed the entire room. Isabella Romano did not know the full story, but she could feel it in the silence that followed. Matteo De Luca did not react like a man surprised to see an old fiancé. He reacted like a man seeing a ghost return from a grave he had never fully believed in. His jaw tightened, his eyes went colder, and for several seconds he did not move at all. Dante stood nearby, watching him carefully, as though even he wasn't sure what Matteo might do next. Luca slept in the armchair by the fireplace, unaware that the woman in the photograph had shifted the danger surrounding him from business to blood. Isabella looked from Matteo to the image. Sofia Moretti stood half-hidden behind Enzo Bellini and the dead waitress, elegant even through grainy surveillance footage, blonde hair tucked beneath a dark scarf, face angled away from the camera, but still unmistakable. Former fiancé? Isabella asked softly before she could stop herself. Matteo's gaze lifted. She immediately regretted the question. Sorry, none of my business. He looked back at the photo. She was supposed to be Luca's mother. The words landed with quiet weight. Isabella's chest tightened, not because of jealousy. She had no right to feel anything like that. She barely knew this man. But something about the sentence carried old pain, and pain always reached her before logic could stop it. What happened? She asked. Dante looked as though he expected Matteo not to answer. Matteo surprised both of them. She disappeared 3 years ago. Isabella frowned. Disappeared? 2 weeks before the wedding. Silence settled again. Matteo's hand rested flat on the desk near the photograph, controlled but tense. The official story was that she left because she couldn't accept my world. His mouth hardened. The unofficial story was that she betrayed us. Isabella looked toward Luca sleeping peacefully. Does he know her? No. The answer came too quickly, too sharply. He was too young. Isabella heard what Matteo didn't say. or what he refused to say. Luca was too young to remember the woman who might have become his mother, but Matteo remembered everything. The late hour became heavier. The fire crackled. Rain began tapping against the dark library windows. Dante finally broke the silence. If Sofia is involved, this isn't just an attack from Rinaldi. Matteo's eyes narrowed. No. Isabella noticed the name. Rinaldi? Dante glanced at Matteo, waiting for permission. Matteo nodded once. Dante explained in as few words as possible. Carlo Rinaldi was a rival mafia boss who had spent 15 years trying to weaken Matteo's empire. Enzo Bellini worked for him. The dead waitress had likely been used as a disposable courier. Sofia's presence meant one of two things. Either she had been working with Rinaldi all along, or someone wanted Matteo to believe she had. Isabella listened carefully, her mind returning to details from the restaurant, the garnish, the missing injector, the substitute server, the timing. Something didn't fit. Why would they target Luca? She asked. Matteo's eyes shifted toward her. The question seemed to cost him something. To hurt me. No. Isabella said it before thinking. Both men looked at her. She swallowed but continued. If they wanted to hurt you, there were easier ways. Public ways. Direct ways. But this was quiet. A dessert sample. Missing medication. A server no one noticed. If Luca had died, everyone could blame the restaurant. It would look like negligence, not war. Dante's expression changed. Matteo's sharpened. Go on. Isabella felt suddenly self-conscious. She was still the waitress in borrowed clothes, standing inside a billionaire mafia boss's private library, daring to analyze a crime involving people who could make her disappear. But Luca had nearly died. That mattered more than fear. Maybe the goal wasn't just to kill Luca. Her voice softened. Maybe the goal was to create a reason to bring someone close. Matteo stared at her. Someone like you. The answer came quietly. Isabella's stomach dropped. That's not what I meant. But it may be true. The possibility turned the air cold. Had she saved Luca because she noticed what others missed, or had someone wanted her involved from the beginning? The thought made no sense. She was nobody. A waitress. A woman mocked by coworkers. A woman Marco had discarded like a mistake. Yet the more she denied it, the more Matteo looked as though he was considering the possibility seriously. Before anyone could speak again, Luca stirred in the armchair. Dad? Matteo's expression softened instantly. He crossed the room and knelt beside his son. The transformation still startled Isabella. With everyone else, Matteo was ice. With Luca, he became careful fire. I'm here. Luca blinked sleepily. Is Isabella leaving? The question cut through all the tension. Isabella opened her mouth, but Matteo answered first. No. She looked at him sharply. He did not look away from his son. Luca relaxed immediately. Good. Then he reached for Isabella's hand without fully waking. The tiny gesture stunned everyone. Isabella crossed the room and sat beside him. Luca held her fingers tightly and fell back asleep within seconds. Matteo watched them. Something unreadable moved behind his eyes. Not suspicion now, not only gratitude, something much more dangerous. Later, after Luca was carried to his room by Matteo himself, Isabella tried once again to discuss going home. Matteo refused before she finished the sentence. You need clothes, he said instead. Isabella blinked. That is not the same conversation. It is now. You cannot just decide to buy me clothes. I didn't say buy. Then what? Maria will arrange it. Isabella stared. Who is Maria? My housekeeper. The answer came so matter-of-factly that Isabella nearly laughed. Of course you have a housekeeper who arranges emergency kidnapping wardrobes. Matteo's mouth almost curved. You're very dramatic. You brought me to a fortress after my shift and told me I can't leave because a dead waitress might be connected to your ex-fiancé and a mafia rival. Accurate, not dramatic. Isabella hated that she almost smiled. The moment ended when Dante returned with another update. We found Marco. Isabella froze. Matteo's gaze moved instantly to her. Marco? My ex. Her voice sounded smaller than she wanted. Dante placed a tablet on the desk. The footage showed Marco outside the restaurant kitchen, arguing with the substitute server hours before Luca's reaction. Isabella's throat tightened. Matteo watched her carefully. Did he know about Luca's allergy? Isabella shook her head. No. Then she paused. But he knew I did. The room went silent. It was an awful realization. Marco knew about her brother's allergy because she had once told him stories from childhood, including how she learned to recognize anaphylaxis quickly. If someone wanted Isabella to notice the attack, Marco could have helped them understand exactly what she would do. Suddenly, her personal life no longer felt separate from Matteo's world. It had been touched, used, violated. Where is he now? Matteo asked. Dante's expression darkened. Missing. Isabella closed her eyes. Of course. Another disappearing witness. Another thread cut before they could pull it. Matteo gave quiet orders. Search his apartment. Freeze accounts if needed. Find his phone records. Interview everyone who saw him. Isabella listened in numb silence. The man who once told her she was too ordinary to be loved might have helped orchestrate an attack that nearly killed a child. She didn't know whether to feel angry, humiliated, or sick. Matteo noticed. Isabella. She looked up. I trusted him. The confession felt pathetic the second it left her mouth. Matteo's expression shifted. That is not your shame. Something in her chest tightened. Feels like it. Then let me be clear. His voice became lower. The shame belongs to the person who used your trust as a weapon. She stared at him, unable to answer. No one had ever phrased it that way before. No one had ever removed the blame from her so easily. The dangerous part was how much she wanted to believe him. By morning, the mansion had fully transformed into a crisis command center. Investigators moved through the lower wing. Security feeds played across monitors. Luca remained under guard but refused to stay away from Isabella. He followed her to breakfast, brought her a drawing he had made of her fighting evil dessert monsters, and announced to the entire dining room that she was his favorite person after his dad. Isabella turned red. Matteo looked far too pleased. The fragile warmth lasted until Maria, the housekeeper, entered carrying a sealed envelope recovered from Isabella's apartment. Isabella stood abruptly. My apartment? Maria's face was solemn. Someone broke in during the night. The room went quiet. Matteo was instantly on his feet. Damage? Maria shook her head. Nothing stolen that we can tell. Isabella reached for the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single photograph. Not from the restaurant, not from the mansion, from years earlier. Isabella at 16 standing beside her younger brother outside a hospital. On the back, written in black ink, were 5 words. You were chosen for this. Her blood ran cold. Matteo took the photograph carefully, his expression turning lethal. Luca moved closer to Isabella and slipped his small hand into hers. No one spoke, because the message confirmed the worst possibility. Isabella had not stumbled into Matteo de Luca's world by accident. Someone had been watching her for years, and whoever they were, they knew exactly how to use a frightened little boy to bring her through the gates. The girl who was chosen. Isabella Romano stared at the photograph until the edges blurred. 16-year-old her stood outside a hospital beside her younger brother, both of them thinner, younger, frightened by a life that had already demanded too much too early. She remembered that day. Remembered the smell of disinfectant clinging to her clothes. Remembered her brother's swollen face after the allergic reaction that nearly killed him. Remembered holding his hand and promising she would never let it happen again. What she did not remember was anyone taking that photograph. What she did not understand was why it had appeared inside an envelope recovered from her apartment after someone broke in. You were chosen for this. 5 words. Simple, terrifying. Matteo de Luca stood beside her in the dining room, holding the photograph with the kind of stillness that made the air around him colder. Luca clung to Isabella's hand, sensing fear even if he didn't fully understand it. Maria, the housekeeper, waited silently near the doorway, her face pale with concern. Chosen by who? Isabella whispered. No one answered. Not because they didn't hear her, because nobody knew. Matteo handed the photo to Dante, who had just entered after receiving another security update. Find where this was printed. Find who entered her apartment. Find every person who knew about her brother's allergy. Dante nodded and disappeared immediately. Isabella finally released Luca's hand, though he didn't move far. I need to go home. Matteo's answer came instantly. No. She turned toward him, anger rising through fear. My apartment was broken into. Exactly. My things are there. They'll be brought here. You can't just move my life into your house. Matteo looked at her with maddening calm. Apparently I can. She opened her mouth, closed it, then pointed toward the photograph. Someone has been watching me for years. His expression softened by 1 degree. Which is why you're safer here. Isabella wanted to argue. She wanted to say that she was not his responsibility, that she had survived long before he entered her life with his black cars and armed guards and impossible commands. But Luca was standing between them, looking up at her with worried eyes, and the truth was too heavy to deny. Someone had attacked his food. Someone had used knowledge from Isabella's past. Someone had broken into her apartment. Her ordinary life was gone whether she accepted it or not. Later that morning, Matteo began investigating Isabella's past with the precision of a man dismantling an enemy organization. Birth records, hospital files, employment records, old school documents, her brother's medical history, every name connected to her family. Isabella sat in the library while strangers in expensive suits quietly uncovered pieces of her life she had never expected anyone to care about. It made her feel exposed, raw, almost violated. Yet Matteo never allowed anyone to speak about her like a file. Each time a man referred to her as the subject, Matteo's eyes lifted, and the man corrected himself immediately. Isabella noticed. She tried not to. Luca spent the morning at her side with a sketchbook, drawing superhero versions of them defeating evil pistachio villains. He gave Isabella a cape in every drawing. Matteo, disturbingly, was drawn with laser eyes. Why does your father have laser eyes? Isabella asked. Luca shrugged. Because he's scary. Matteo looked up from across the room. I heard that. Good, Luca said without looking up. Isabella laughed before she could stop herself. The sound changed the room. Matteo's gaze moved to her, and for a brief moment the investigation, the danger, the armed guards, and the terrifying photograph disappeared. He looked at her as though laughter had become something rare inside his house, and she had accidentally brought it back. That realization warmed and frightened her at the same time. By afternoon, Dante returned with the first answer. The photograph was printed recently from an old surveillance archive. Matteo's expression hardened. Whose archive? Dante hesitated. Sophia's. Silence crashed through the library. Isabella felt the name like a shadow passing over the room. Sophia Moretti, Matteo's former fiancée, the woman from the restaurant footage, the woman who disappeared 3 years ago. Luca stopped drawing. He didn't know the details, but he recognized the tension. Matteo stood slowly. Where? A storage unit outside Catania. Dante placed several photographs on the table. Inside the unit were boxes filled with old files, surveillance images, medical records, school records, and newspaper clippings. All connected to Isabella. Her stomach turned. Why would she have these? Matteo didn't answer. His eyes moved through the photographs, colder with every second. Then one image made him stop, a folder labeled Romano case. Beside it lay another label, De Luca child. Isabella noticed the second phrase and felt a chill. What does that mean? Matteo's jaw tightened. I don't know, but the look on his face suggested he feared he did. Maria quietly crossed herself near the doorway. Nobody noticed except Isabella. That small gesture scared her more than anything else. The day worsened when Luca refused lunch unless Isabella stayed beside him. His attachment had become unmistakable. He followed her through the mansion, brought her drawings, asked whether she liked dogs, asked whether she would come to his school play, asked whether she knew how to make pancakes, and finally asked if she had ever wanted children. Isabella nearly choked on water. Matteo looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. Luca, he said sharply. The boy frowned. What? I was just asking. Isabella tried to smile through the ache in her chest. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Not really. Because the more Luca reached for her, the more Isabella felt something fragile forming, something maternal, something protective, something that made the thought of leaving him unexpectedly painful. That evening, while Luca slept in the family room after insisting Isabella tell him a story, Matteo found her standing near the portrait of his mother again. You keep looking at her. Isabella didn't turn. I look like her. Yes. The honesty startled her. She looked back. Does that bother you? Matteo considered the question longer than expected. It should. Her heart gave a strange little twist. Why? He moved closer, but stopped at a careful distance. Because everyone connected to my past either died, disappeared, or betrayed me. The words carried no self-pity, only fact. That made them sadder. Isabella's voice softened. I'm not your past. His eyes held hers. No. A pause. That's the problem. The air between them shifted. Quiet. Intense. Dangerous. Isabella became aware of the dim firelight, the distance between them, the way Matteo looked at her as though she had walked into his house by accident and somehow disturbed every locked room inside him. Before either of them could speak again, Matteo's phone rang. The moment he looked at the screen, his expression changed. Unknown number. Isabella's stomach tightened. He answered and put it on speaker. Static crackled for 1 second. Then a woman's voice filled the room. Elegant. Cold. Familiar to Matteo in a way Isabella could feel. Hello, Matteo. His face turned to stone. Sophia. Isabella stopped breathing. The woman laughed softly. Still dramatic. Matteo's voice dropped. Where are you? Close enough. Silence. Then Sophia continued. I see you found the waitress. Isabella's blood ran cold. Matteo's eyes shifted toward her. Sophia's voice softened mockingly. Sweet little Isabella. Always saving children, isn't she? Isabella gripped the back of a chair. Why are you watching me? Sophia laughed again. Because you were always part of the story. You just didn't know which role you were playing. Matteo stepped closer to the phone as if he could intimidate the voice through the device. If you touch her or my son. Your son? Sophia interrupted. The words came lightly, too lightly. Are you sure you know everything about your son? Silence filled the room. Matteo didn't move. Isabella felt the question settle like poison. What does that mean? Matteo asked. Sophia ignored him. Ask Maria about the night Luca was born. Maria appeared in the doorway at that exact moment. Her face drained of color. Isabella turned and saw the fear in the older woman's eyes. Real fear. Sophia's voice became softer. Ask why your mother destroyed the hospital records. Ask why Isabella's brother was treated in the same wing. Ask why I kept watching her family all these years. The call ended. Nobody spoke. The room felt suddenly too small. Matteo turned toward Maria slowly. What is she talking about? Maria's lips trembled. Matteo. His voice became dangerously quiet. What happened the night my son was born? Maria looked from Matteo to Isabella, then toward the hallway where Luca slept peacefully, unaware that his entire life might be built on secrets. Isabella felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears. The photograph, the hospital, her brother, the surveillance. Sophia. Luca. Everything was connecting in ways she did not understand. And suddenly feared. Maria finally closed her eyes. One tear slipped down her cheek. There was another child in that hospital, she whispered. Matteo went completely still. Isabella felt the world tilt. Maria opened her eyes and delivered the sentence that changed everything, and Sophia made sure no one ever found out. The secret in the delivery room. Nobody slept after Maria's confession. The words lingered over the mansion like a storm cloud. There was another child in that hospital. And Sophia made sure no one ever found out. Isabella sat motionless in the library long after the conversation ended, staring at the dying fire while questions multiplied faster than answers. Matteo stood near the window overlooking the sea, his silhouette dark against the first light of dawn. He had not spoken for nearly 10 minutes. That alone terrified everyone in the room. Matteo De Luca was a man who made decisions quickly. Silence from him usually meant something dangerous was happening inside his head. Maria remained seated, pale and exhausted. Years of loyalty had never required her to betray a secret like this. Dante waited near the door, understanding instinctively that interrupting Matteo right now would be a mistake. Finally, Matteo turned. "Tell me everything." Maria closed her eyes. "Matteo, everything." The single word carried enough force to end the argument before it began. Maria nodded slowly. The night Luca was born was chaos. Her voice trembled. There was a storm. Half the city lost power. The hospital's backup systems failed twice. Isabella listened carefully. Every detail suddenly mattered. Maria continued. Sophia arrived early. She was frightened. She refused to let anyone except a small group of doctors near her. Matteo's jaw tightened. "I remember. There were complications." Maria looked away. Serious complications. Matteo's face hardened. He remembered that too. Isabella could see it. The fear, the helplessness, the waiting. Maria took a shaky breath. At the same time, another woman was admitted. Silence. "Who?" Matteo asked. Maria hesitated. "A woman named Elena Romano." Isabella froze. Her entire body went rigid. "Romano?" Maria nodded. "Your mother." The room disappeared. Isabella heard the words but struggled to understand them. Her mother. The same hospital. The same night. Matteo slowly turned toward her. Neither spoke. Maria continued. "Your mother arrived in critical condition after a car accident." Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. She remembered the accident. Not clearly. She had been young. She only remembered police officers. Hospital hallways. Her grandfather crying when he thought nobody was watching. "My mother wasn't pregnant," Isabella whispered. Maria looked at her sadly. "Officially, no." Silence exploded across the room. Matteo's eyes narrowed. Dante stopped breathing. Isabella felt like she had been pushed off a cliff. "What do you mean officially?" Maria looked as though she hated every word she was about to say. "The hospital records state your mother was treated for injuries from the accident." She swallowed. "The records that disappeared tell a different story." Matteo stepped forward. "What records?" Maria met his gaze. The record showing Elena Romano was carrying a child. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even the waves crashing against the cliffs outside seemed to fade away. Isabella stared at Maria. "No." The word came out weak. Broken. "Impossible. My mother never told me." "She couldn't." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "She died 2 days later." Isabella felt dizzy. Matteo moved instinctively toward her. Not touching. Close enough to catch her if she fell. She hated how much comfort that offered. "Are you saying my mother lost a baby?" Isabella asked. Maria looked down. "That's what everyone believed." Matteo's voice became dangerously quiet. "Believed?" Maria nodded slowly. "Because the child disappeared. The room froze." Dante muttered something under his breath. Matteo stared at Maria without blinking. Isabella felt her heart pounding so hard it hurt. A missing child. The same hospital. The same night Luca was born. Sophia involved somehow. Nothing made sense. Yet every answer seemed connected. Maria continued. Hospital staff were told the baby died shortly after delivery. "And?" Matteo asked. Maria looked directly at him. "There was never a death certificate." Silence. Absolute silence. Isabella felt as though she couldn't breathe. Matteo's expression became colder with every second. He had entered the room believing he was investigating an attempt on his son's life. Now he was uncovering a mystery buried nearly a decade ago. "Who handled the records?" he asked. Maria answered immediately. "Sophia." The name landed like a gunshot. Isabella pressed her hands against the edge of the table. Her mind raced. Why would Sophia control records connected to Isabella's mother? Why would she watch Isabella for years afterward? Why keep photographs? Why track her family? Unless a horrifying possibility surfaced. No. Matteo turned toward her. What? Isabella shook her head. It's impossible. Say it. Her voice trembled. What if Sophia wasn't watching me? Nobody moved. What if she was watching the missing child? The room went completely silent. Matteo's eyes locked onto hers. Dante slowly lowered the folder in his hands. Maria covered her mouth. Because for the first time since the investigation began, a theory connected everything. The photographs, the surveillance, the years of observation, the envelope, the message. You were chosen for this. Not random, not obsession. Monitoring, tracking, waiting. Matteo immediately turned to Dante. DNA. Dante nodded, already thinking it. Isabella felt sick. DNA for what? Neither man answered immediately. Matteo finally looked at her. To find out who the missing child was, her stomach dropped. Hours later, the mansion became a fortress of activity. Medical specialists arrived. Lawyers appeared. Investigators dug through archives dating back decades. Every surviving hospital employee connected to that night was located. Some were retired, some had moved, one had disappeared entirely. Matteo's organization moved like a machine once it had a target. Yet through all of it, Isabella felt detached. Numb. She sat beside Luca in the garden while he fed pieces of bread to ducks near a fountain. The innocence of the scene felt unreal compared to the storm surrounding them. You look sad, Luca said. Isabella forced a smile. Thinking. Luca considered this seriously. Thinking usually makes adults sad. She laughed softly. Sometimes. Luca tossed another piece of bread. Dad thinks all the time, I noticed. Luca smiled. But he smiles more when you're here. The simple statement hit harder than it should have. Isabella looked away quickly. Matteo was standing across the garden speaking with Dante. Even from a distance he commanded attention. Strong, controlled, dangerous. Yet when Luca ran toward him moments later, Matteo immediately crouched to listen. The contrast still surprised her. He noticed Luca's scraped knee before anyone else, fixed a loose shoelace, brushed dirt from the boy's jacket. Small things, important things. For a terrifying moment, Isabella found herself imagining what life would have looked like if Luca had always had a mother. She shut the thought down immediately. That road led nowhere safe. By evening, the first DNA results arrived. Not the complete analysis. Just enough to create new questions. Matteo gathered everyone in the library. Dante entered carrying a sealed folder. His expression told them everything before he even spoke. Well? Matteo asked. Dante opened the file. The hospital records were altered. Nobody looked surprised anymore. Dante continued. Multiple files were changed by the same administrator account. Sophia? Matteo asked. Dante nodded. Yes. Isabella closed her eyes briefly. Every answer pointed back to the same woman. Then Dante delivered the second revelation. The missing infant's blood sample still exists. Matteo went completely still. Isabella felt her pulse accelerate. Where? Stored in an archived laboratory database. Silence. Matteo's voice dropped lower. And? Dante looked up from the file. The sample was accessed 6 months ago. Isabella's stomach twisted. By who? Dante slowly closed the folder. Sophia Moretti. Nobody spoke. Nobody could. Because Sophia hadn't just hidden the truth years ago. She had returned to it recently, which meant whatever happened that night in the hospital wasn't ancient history. It was the reason someone targeted Luca now, the reason Isabella had been watched, the reason witnesses were dying. Matteo stared toward the dark window overlooking the sea. For the first time since Isabella met him, she saw something that looked dangerously close to fear. Not fear for himself, fear for Luca, fear for a truth still buried somewhere ahead of them. Then Dante's phone rang. He answered immediately. 30 seconds later, his face turned white. Matteo noticed. What? Dante lowered the phone slowly. We found Marco. Isabella's chest tightened. Matteo waited. Dante swallowed. He's dead. Silence. Another witness gone. Another loose end erased. But Dante wasn't finished. There was something in his pocket. Matteo's eyes narrowed. What? Dante looked directly at Isabella. A photograph. The room became still. Of what? Isabella whispered. Dante handed it over. Her fingers trembled as she looked down. The image showed a hospital room from 9 years ago. A newborn baby wrapped in a blue blanket. A woman holding the child. Not Sofia. Not her mother. Maria gasped. Matteo froze, because standing beside the hospital bed, smiling at the baby, was Sofia Moretti, and written on the back in faded black ink were 4 words that changed everything. This is the real heir. The real heir. The words on the back of the photograph turned the library into a grave. This is the real heir. 4 words, written in faded black ink, yet powerful enough to make everyone forget how to breathe. Isabella held the picture with both hands, while Matteo stood so still beside her that he seemed carved from the same cold marble as the mansion itself. Maria had one hand pressed against her chest. Dante stared at the image with the expression of a man who had seen too many secrets and understood this one might be worse than all the rest. The photograph showed a hospital room from 9 years ago, a newborn baby wrapped in a blue blanket, and Sofia Moretti standing beside the bed with a smile that now looked less like tenderness and more like possession. The phrase on the back changed everything. It suggested Luca was not merely a child targeted by Matteo's enemies. It suggested Luca's identity had been built on a lie. Isabella looked toward the hallway where the boy slept, innocent and unaware, and felt a fierce ache rise inside her chest. Whatever truth waited ahead, he did not deserve to be broken by it. Matteo seemed to read the same thought on her face. No one speaks of this near him, he said quietly. Nobody argued. By sunrise, the mansion had become a war room. Dante's men reopened every record from the night Luca was born. Medical databases were hacked, doctors located, nurses questioned, old payment trails pulled from forgotten accounts. Isabella sat at the long table in the library, staring at hospital documents while trying not to imagine Luca waking up and asking why everyone looked afraid. Matteo moved around the room like controlled violence in a black suit. He gave orders, reviewed files, and dismantled lies with terrifying precision, but every few minutes his gaze drifted toward the family wing where his son slept. His son. Isabella caught herself repeating those words. Because blood did not change who had held Luca during nightmares, who tied his shoes, who taught him how to ride a bicycle, who sat beside his bed when fever made him cry. Whatever the records revealed, Matteo was Luca's father in every way that mattered. Yet in Matteo's world, bloodlines carried power, inheritance, and danger. If Sofia had hidden the real heir, the secret could destroy more than a family. It could trigger a war. Around mid-morning, Dante returned with the first undeniable evidence. The baby in the photograph was registered under a temporary name, he said, placing a file on the desk. Male infant. No public birth certificate, no death record, no adoption file. Matteo's expression hardened. And Luca? Dante hesitated. Isabella felt the hesitation like a knife. Luca's hospital file was created 12 hours after birth. Silence. Matteo's voice dropped. Meaning? Dante met his eyes. Meaning there are no medical records from the first 12 hours of his life. Maria closed her eyes. Isabella's stomach twisted. Matteo looked at the file, then at the portrait of his mother above the fireplace, as if asking ghosts for answers they had no right to keep. Sofia controlled the wing, Maria whispered. She said it was for security. She said enemies might try to harm the baby. Matteo turned toward her. And you believed her. It wasn't accusation exactly. It was pain. Maria's face crumpled. We all did. The next clue came from Isabella. Not because she understood Mafia records, but because she noticed people. She had been studying the photograph for nearly an hour when something small pulled at her attention. The bracelet on Sofia's wrist. A thin gold chain with a blue stone. Isabella had seen it before, not on Sofia. On someone else. Her heart began to pound. Matteo. He was beside her instantly. What? She pointed to the bracelet. My mother had one like this. Matteo's eyes sharpened. You're sure? Isabella nodded slowly. I remember it from pictures. She almost never took it off. Maria leaned closer, and the moment she saw the bracelet, her face drained of color. That belonged to Elena. Isabella looked at her. My mother? Maria nodded. She wore it the night of the accident. The room went completely still. Isabella stared at Sophia's wrist in the photograph. The implication was sickening. If Sophia wore Elena Romano's bracelet in the hospital room, then she had been near Isabella's mother, near the missing child, near the truth. Matteo spoke first. Find the bracelet. Dante nodded and left. Isabella remained seated, feeling as if pieces of her life were being stolen and rearranged by dead women, dangerous men, and secrets buried before she was old enough to understand them. An hour later, Luca found her in the library. Despite every guard trying to redirect him, the boy slipped past them with the impressive determination of a child raised in a fortress. Why is everyone weird? He asked. Isabella immediately forced a smile. Adults are always weird. Luca narrowed his eyes. You're lying. She blinked. Excuse me? Dad does that face too. She almost laughed. Almost. Then Luca climbed into the chair beside her and leaned against her arm. The trust in the gesture nearly broke her. Are you leaving? He asked. Isabella looked down at him. Why would you ask that? He shrugged, but his voice became smaller. People leave, Dad, her heart cracked quietly. Across the room, Matteo had entered and stopped just inside the doorway. He had heard everything. Isabella could feel him there. She gently brushed Luca's hair back. I'm here right now. Luca held her arm tighter. That's not the same. She had no answer. Matteo finally crossed the room and crouched in front of his son. Luca. The boy looked at him. Is she in trouble? Matteo's expression softened. No. Isabella noticed he did not say safe. Luca looked unconvinced. Promise? Matteo paused. Then his eyes shifted briefly to Isabella. I promise no one will take her from this house unless she chooses to leave. Isabella's breath caught. The promise was to Luca, but the meaning reached her. Choice. Protection. Not imprisonment. For the first time since arriving, staying did not feel like a cage. It felt like something dangerous and almost comforting. By evening, Dante found the bracelet. Not in Sophia's possession, not in an archive, in a sealed evidence bag hidden inside the storage unit outside Catania, wrapped with another photograph. This one showed Isabella's mother, Elena Romano, unconscious in a hospital bed. Beside her stood Sophia. In Sophia's arms was a newborn baby. The baby's face was turned away. On the back of the photo were two dates. The date Luca was born, and the date Isabella's mother died. Beneath them was one line. The mother died. The child lived. Isabella felt the room spinning. Matteo reached for her before she fell, his hand closing around her elbow with careful strength. Breathe, he said quietly. She tried. Failed. Tried again. My mother had a baby, she whispered. Matteo's face looked carved from grief and fury. Yes, and Sophia took it. The words tasted like poison. Nobody corrected her. Because by then, everyone suspected the same thing. Sophia had not merely hidden a child, she had stolen one. The question was which child had been stolen and where that child had gone. The answer came late that night from a retired nurse, Dante's men found living under a false name near Palermo. She was frightened enough to talk quickly. Her testimony arrived by encrypted video. The nurse confirmed that 2 infants had been in the secured maternity wing during the storm. One born to Sophia's arrangement, one delivered after Elena Romano's accident. One child disappeared from the official records. The other became Luca de Luca. Which one? Matteo asked, his voice deadly calm. The old nurse shook her head, crying. I don't know. Sophia changed the bands. She took the files. She said if anyone spoke, their families would vanish. Isabella gripped the edge of the table. Matteo stared at the screen. Was the child in the blue blanket Elena's baby? The nurse's face collapsed. I think so. Silence. Then the nurse whispered the sentence that destroyed the last fragile illusion. But the baby Sophia carried out that night was not the baby she brought in. The screen went black after that because the nurse panicked and disconnected. Nobody moved. Isabella felt cold everywhere. Matteo looked toward the hallway again, toward Luca's room. Bloodline, heir, son, stolen child, missing identity. Every word became a weapon. Then Sophia sent another message. This time it came with no call, only a video file. Matteo played it on the library screen. Sophia appeared seated in a dark room, elegant as ever, smiling like someone who still believed she controlled the ending. By now, you know enough to suffer, she said softly, but not enough to understand. Her eyes shifted slightly, as if she could see Isabella through the camera. Sweet Isabella, did you really think you saved Luca by accident? You were brought to him because blood recognizes blood. Isabella's heart stopped. Matteo stepped closer to the screen. Sophia smiled wider. Ask yourself why that boy trusted you before he knew you. Ask why he reached for you. Ask why I watched your family for years. She leaned in. The real heir has been sleeping under Matteo's roof all along. The video ended. No one spoke. Then a sound came from the doorway. A small, frightened voice. Dad? Everyone turned. Luca stood there in his pajamas, pale and confused, eyes moving from Matteo to Isabella to the frozen black screen. He had heard enough. Not everything, but enough. Isabella's chest tightened painfully. Matteo crossed the room immediately, but Luca stepped back. Am I not your son? The question shattered the room. Matteo stopped, as if struck. For one terrible second, even he seemed unable to speak. Then he knelt slowly, bringing himself to the boy's height. His voice, when it came, was rougher than Isabella had ever heard. You are my son. Luca's eyes filled with tears. But what if I'm not? Matteo reached for him, and this time Luca didn't move away. Listen to me. Whatever they changed, whatever they stole, whatever they lied about, you are my son because I chose you every day, and I will choose you every day after this. Luca began to cry. Matteo pulled him into his arms. Isabella turned away because the sight hurt too much and healed too much at the same time. But Luca reached for her too. One small hand stretched over Matteo's shoulder toward Isabella. She froze. Matteo looked at her. There was no command in his eyes now, only invitation. Isabella stepped forward, and Luca pulled her into the hug as best he could. For the first time, the three of them held one another in the middle of a room full of secrets that could still destroy them. And somewhere beyond the mansion walls, Sophia Moretti smiled at the chaos she had created, unaware that her greatest mistake had not been exposing the truth. Her greatest mistake had been giving Matteo and Isabella someone to protect together. The house chose. Her Matteo de Luca did not let the scandal reach Luca. That was the first order he gave after the boy fell asleep again in Isabella's arms, exhausted from crying and confused by adult secrets no child should have heard. No one was to whisper in corridors. No one was to speculate near staff. No one was to mention bloodlines, hospital records, heirs, Sophia, or the words real son anywhere near the family wing. The punishment for disobedience remained unspoken because in Matteo's house, people understood silence could be sharper than threats. By morning, the mansion moved differently. Guards stood farther from Luca's door, not to frighten him. Maria dismissed half the staff from the upper floor. Dante personally reviewed every camera angle. Matteo turned his empire inward, not to protect his power, but to protect an 8-year-old boy whose entire identity had been shaken by 4 words written on the back of a photograph. Isabella became the one person Luca refused to release. He woke with his hand still tangled in hers and immediately asked whether she would have breakfast with him. She said yes before Matteo could answer. Over pancakes, Luca tried to act normal. He asked for extra syrup. He complained about schoolwork. He pretended not to look at his father every 30 seconds, as if checking whether Matteo still saw him the same way. Matteo noticed every glance. Each one cut him. Isabella saw it because she had spent her life noticing quiet pain. Finally, Matteo set down his coffee and looked at his son. Come here. Luca hesitated, then slid from his chair and walked over. Matteo pulled him onto his lap in front of everyone at the breakfast table, something so openly tender that Maria covered her mouth, and Dante suddenly found the window fascinating. Listen to me, Matteo said, his voice low but steady. Whatever anyone says, Whatever papers appear, whatever lies were told before you were born, you are my son." Luca's lower lip trembled. "Even if." Matteo shook his head. "No, even if." The words landed with absolute certainty. "You are my son." Luca buried his face against his father's chest, and Isabella had to look down at her plate because the sight was too intimate, too painful, too beautiful. Then Luca reached one hand backward without looking, searching for her. Isabella placed her fingers in his. Matteo saw. The moment changed something between all three of them. Not loudly, not officially, but completely. By noon, the first real DNA report arrived. Matteo read it inside the library with Isabella, Dante, Maria, and the family attorney present. The document was only preliminary, but it contained enough truth to make the room feel airless. Luca's DNA did not match Sofia Moretti. Silence followed. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Isabella closed her eyes for 1 second, because even though everyone had suspected it, suspicion and proof were not the same. Matteo remained perfectly still. Maria began to cry silently. Dante stared at the report as if wanting to kill paper. "And my line?" Matteo asked quietly. The attorney swallowed. Paternal match confirmed. Isabella released the breath she had been holding. Luca was Matteo's biological son. That truth should have brought relief, and it did, but only partly. Because the report also confirmed something monstrous. Sofia had not given birth to Luca. She had presented someone else's child as hers. Someone had erased the first 12 hours of his life, altered maternity records, and buried the identity of the real mother. Matteo's voice became cold. "Find his mother." Dante nodded immediately. Isabella turned away because the words struck somewhere inside her she was not ready to examine. His mother. Not Sofia. A woman whose baby had been stolen from history. A woman who might have died without anyone knowing the truth. A woman whose story now seemed dangerously close to Isabella's own family. Later that afternoon, while investigators raced through hospital archives, Isabella tried to make Luca's day feel normal. She sat with him in the garden under a lemon tree while he drew superheroes again, except this time the drawings had changed. His father no longer had laser eyes. Matteo now had a shield. Isabella had one too. "Why do we both have shields?" she asked. Luca shrugged without looking up. "Because you both protect me." The pencil kept moving across the paper. "And each other." Isabella went still. Children noticed more than adults wanted them to. She looked across the garden where Matteo stood, speaking to Dante near the fountain. As if sensing her attention, Matteo turned. Their eyes met across the sunlight. The connection lasted only a second, but it filled her chest with dangerous warmth. She looked away first. She had to. That evening, Sofia made her demand. The message arrived as a video file sent directly to Matteo's private phone. He played it in the secure study with Isabella standing nearby, because by then neither of them pretended she was separate from this anymore. Sofia appeared seated in a dark room, perfect makeup, silk blouse, diamond earrings, and a smile sharp enough to draw blood. "You have the first result by now," she said. "Congratulations, Matteo. You know I am not Luca's mother. But you still don't know who is." Matteo's face revealed nothing. Isabella's hands curled into fists. Sofia continued. "I have the original hospital files, real signatures, real recordings, real names. If you want them, bring Isabella to the old opera house tomorrow night. No guards inside. No Dante, no police. Just you, the waitress, and the boy's truth." The video ended. The room went silent. Matteo's answer came before anyone asked. "No." Isabella looked at him. "You didn't even think about it. I don't need to. She has the records. She has bait. She has the truth about Luca's mother." Matteo stepped closer. "And she wants you." The words struck harder than expected. Isabella opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Matteo's expression was controlled, yet beneath it she saw fury and fear twisted together. Not fear of Sofia, fear for Isabella. "I will not trade you for paper," he said. Her heart stumbled. "It's not just paper. It's his mother. Then I'll get it another way. And if there isn't another way?" He looked at her for a long moment. There is always another way. The conversation might have become an argument if Luca's voice had not come from the doorway. "You're talking about me again." Both turned. Luca stood there clutching his superhero drawing, eyes too old for his small face. Isabella immediately softened. "Luca." He looked at Matteo. "I want to know." Matteo's jaw tightened. "You will." "When?" The room became painfully quiet. Matteo crouched in front of him. "When I can give you the truth without handing someone I care about to Sofia?" Luca's eyes moved to Isabella. "She wants Isabella?" Matteo nodded once. Luca's face hardened with childish determination. "Then I don't want the truth that way." Isabella's throat tightened. Matteo looked like the words wounded and healed him at the same time. Luca walked to Isabella and wrapped both arms around her waist. "She's not going." The boy's certainty broke something inside her. She gently rested a hand on his hair. "You don't have to protect me." Luca mumbled against her sweater. "You protected me first." After he was taken back to bed by Maria, Isabella stood alone in the hallway trying to breathe through emotions too large to name. Matteo approached silently. For a moment neither spoke. Then he said, "He loves you." Isabella closed her eyes. "Don't say that." "Why?" Her voice trembled despite her best effort. "Because I don't know how to carry it." Matteo's expression shifted. Something in him softened, but his voice remained steady. "Then, don't carry it alone." She opened her eyes. He was closer than before. Not touching. Waiting. Always that impossible line between command and restraint. "You keep saying things like that," she whispered, "because you keep trying to stand by yourself in a war that already chose you." The honesty stole her answer. Before the silence could become something neither of them could retreat from, Dante appeared at the end of the hall. "Boss." Matteo's patience visibly thinned. "This better matter." Dante looked at Isabella, then back at Matteo. "It does." In his hand was another report. Not Sofia's records. Not a demand. Something pulled from the archived hospital database. Matteo took it and read the first page. His expression changed immediately. Isabella felt cold. "What?" she asked. Matteo handed her the report without speaking. The words blurred at first. Then one name sharpened on the page. Elena Romano, Isabella's mother. Beneath it was a maternity record marked emergency delivery. Infant male. Survived. Transferred. No death certificate. No adoption record. No legal release. Isabella stopped breathing. The hallway seemed to tilt. Matteo reached for her, but she barely felt his hand on her arm. Infant male. Survived. Her mother's child had lived. Her brother, the one she remembered from childhood, had been older than her. This infant had been someone else. Someone hidden. Someone erased. Someone born the same night Luca entered Matteo's life. Isabella looked toward Luca's bedroom door at the end of the hall. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Matteo. He already understood. She saw it in his face. Horror. Recognition. Protectiveness. A truth neither of them wanted to say yet. Then Dante's phone rang. He answered, listened, and went pale. "Boss," he said quietly. Sofia sent another file. Matteo's eyes never left Isabella. "Play it." Dante turned the phone. The video was grainy. Old hospital footage from 9 years ago. Sofia appeared in the maternity wing, carrying a newborn wrapped in blue. Behind her, a nurse pushed another empty bassinet away. Then the camera angle shifted just enough to reveal a bracelet on the baby's ankle. The name printed there was not Luca de Luca. It was Romano, male infant. Isabella felt the world collapse beneath her. The boy sleeping down the hall, the child who had reached for her before he knew her, the child she saved, the child who somehow felt heartbreakingly familiar, was not only Matteo's son. He might also be her mother's lost baby, her blood, her little brother, and Sofia had known from the beginning. The boy they both loved. Isabella Romano did not sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the grainy hospital footage again. The blue blanket. Sofia carrying the baby. The ankle bracelet. Romano. Me l'infant. The words echoed through her mind until they no longer felt like evidence. They felt like destiny. Somewhere down the hallway, Luca slept peacefully beneath a blanket, decorated with cartoon superheroes, completely unaware that the truth threatening to tear apart powerful families, old lies, and hidden empires revolved around him. Isabella sat alone on the terrace overlooking the sea while dawn slowly painted the Sicilian horizon gold. She tried to imagine the impossible. If Luca truly was her mother's missing child, then he wasn't just a boy she had saved. He wasn't simply Matteo's son. He was her little brother. The thought should have felt strange. Instead, it explained too much. The immediate connection, the fierce instinct to protect him, the way Luca trusted her before trust should have existed, the way every goodbye already felt painful. Tears gathered in her eyes before she realized it. You should be sleeping. Matteo's voice came from behind her. Isabella quickly wiped her face. So should you. He stepped beside her and looked toward the sea. For several seconds, neither spoke. The silence between them no longer felt awkward. It felt familiar, dangerous, necessary. Finally, Matteo said, I ordered a second DNA analysis. Isabella nodded. Good. 3 separate laboratories. Also good. Matteo glanced toward her. You think I'm stalling? She laughed softly. You're terrified. His jaw tightened. He didn't deny it. That frightened her more than if he had. Matteo de Luca feared very few things. If Luca is your brother. He stopped. Isabella turned toward him. What? His eyes remained fixed on the ocean. Then someone stole 9 years from both of you. The words hit harder than she expected. Because they weren't about bloodlines. They weren't about inheritance or secrets or scandals. They were about birthdays missed. Christmas mornings lost. Family photographs that never existed. A sister who never knew she had a brother. A little boy who never knew he had a family beyond the father who raised him. Matteo continued quietly. And someone used him as a weapon. Isabella's heart broke for him then. Because beneath every mystery, every conspiracy, every dangerous revelation, there was a simple truth. Matteo loved Luca. Nothing would change that. Not blood tests, not hospital records, not Sofia, not destiny. By noon, Matteo launched his counterattack. Sofia had demanded a meeting at the old opera house. Matteo agreed. Publicly. Every channel she monitored received confirmation. Every spy she planted heard the same message. Matteo de Luca would attend. Alone, with Isabella, exactly as requested. Dante immediately understood the lie. Isabella did too. You have a plan. Matteo looked at her over a stack of surveillance photographs. Several. Dante smirked. 9, technically. Isabella shook her head. And Sofia expects this. Yes. And she expects you to lie. Also yes. So she expects you to expect her expectations. Dante rubbed his forehead. This is why I hate rich criminals. For the first time in days, Isabella laughed. Matteo's eyes immediately found her. That tiny moment of happiness disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived, but neither of them missed it. The afternoon brought another revelation. Investigators located the doctor who signed the altered hospital documents. He had been living under a different name in southern France. Matteo's people brought him to Sicily before sunset. Isabella wasn't present during the interrogation. She didn't want to be. But when Matteo emerged 3 hours later, she knew immediately they had learned something significant. His face carried the expression of a man standing too close to a cliff. What did he say? She asked. Matteo looked at her for a long moment before answering. Sofia paid him. Isabella nodded. Expected. To switch the records? Yes. Why? Matteo's gaze darkened. Because Luca was never supposed to inherit anything. The answer confused her. What does that mean? Matteo handed her a document. She read it twice before understanding. Then a third time because her brain refused to accept it. Luca's biological mother had not been Sofia. Luca's biological mother had been connected to the De Luca family through a bloodline carrying voting rights, inheritance authority, and control over several family trusts. If Luca's true mother was identified, control of enormous assets would eventually pass through him. Sofia had hidden the truth because she wanted that power for herself. Isabella lowered the papers slowly. She stole a child. Matteo nodded. For money. Matteo's voice became ice. And influence. Isabella felt physically sick. Some crimes were too cruel to comprehend. The more they uncovered, the more Sofia transformed from a former fiancé into something far darker. Yet one question remained unanswered. Why watch Isabella? Why monitor her family? Why spend years tracking someone who seemed unrelated to Luca's inheritance? The answer arrived just after sunset. A courier package appeared at the main gate. No return address, no fingerprints, no traceable source. Inside sat a small memory card. Matteo, Dante, Isabella, and Maria gathered in the secure study while the file loaded. The video quality was poor. Old. Recorded secretly. Hospital footage again, this time from a different angle. Isabella's pulse accelerated immediately. The timestamp matched the night Luca was born. Nurses moved through the maternity wing. Doctors rushed between rooms. Then the camera focused on Elena Romano's hospital room. Isabella stopped breathing. Her mother lay unconscious in bed. Beside her stood Sofia. The image froze for a moment. Then another woman entered carrying a newborn. Sofia accepted the baby, smiled, looked directly toward the camera, and said 6 words that changed everything. The sister will protect him. The video ended. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Isabella felt as though the world had vanished beneath her feet. The sister will protect him. Not might, not could, will. Sofia knew. 9 years ago, she already knew. She had identified Isabella, watched her grow up, tracked her life, monitored her family. Not because Isabella was a threat, because Isabella was part of the plan. A backup. A future guardian. Matteo slowly turned toward her. She knew who you were. Isabella nodded numbly. She knew all along. Maria covered her mouth. Dante swore quietly. Then another realization struck Isabella. No. Matteo looked at her. What? Her face had gone pale. If Sofia knew I would protect Luca. Her voice cracked. Then she knew I would come running if he was in danger. Silence filled the room. Matteo understood first. His eyes hardened instantly. The allergic reaction. The missing injector. The restaurant. One. 7 to wine. The setup. None of it had been random. None of it had been merely an assassination attempt. Sofia had engineered a situation guaranteed to bring Isabella into Luca's life. Isabella's stomach turned. She wanted me here. Matteo stood immediately. Dante, the security chief, was already moving. On it. Every alarm inside the mansion activated at once. Guards flooded corridors. Gates locked. Surveillance feeds multiplied across screens. Isabella jumped to her feet. What happened? Dante's voice came through the radio. We have movement. Matteo's expression became lethal. Where? The family wing. Isabella's blood froze. Luca. Matteo was already running before anyone finished speaking. Isabella followed. Security teams flooded hallways. Doors slammed open. Staff shouted. The mansion transformed into controlled chaos. Matteo reached Luca's bedroom first. Isabella arrived seconds later. The room was empty. The bed untouched. The window open. Silence. Terrible silence. Matteo stopped moving. For one heartbeat, the entire world froze. Then Dante appeared in the doorway holding a phone. His face looked grim. Boss. Matteo turned slowly. Dante handed him the device. A video call had already connected. Sofia appeared on the screen smiling calmly. Behind her sat Luca, unharmed, frightened, alive. Isabella's knees nearly gave out from relief and terror at the same time. Sofia tilted her head slightly. Good evening. Matteo's voice became the most dangerous sound Isabella had ever heard. If he has a scratch on him, Sophia smiled. Then come to the opera house. Luca immediately leaned toward the camera. Dad! Matteo's entire face changed. Fear, relief, rage, love, all at once. I'm coming. Sophia's smile widened. Bring Isabella. The screen went black. Silence remained. Then Matteo turned toward Isabella. His eyes held absolute certainty. No. She already knew what he meant. Yes. No. She's using me. Exactly. Isabella stepped closer. And she's using Luca. The words landed between them like a challenge. Matteo's jaw tightened. For several seconds, neither looked away. Then Isabella whispered the only truth that mattered. He's my family, too. The room became still. Matteo stared at her, not as a waitress, not as a witness, not as a woman he was desperately trying not to lose. Family. The word changed everything. And somewhere inside the abandoned opera house, Sophia waited for them, convinced she still controlled the board. Unaware that for the first time since this began, Matteo and Isabella wanted the same thing more than they feared each other. They were coming for Luca. The opera house trap. The abandoned opera house stood at the edge of Palermo like a dead queen in a torn velvet dress, beautiful once, ruined now, its carved balconies cracked, its marble pillars stained by rain, its gilded ceilings darkened by years of dust and neglect. Matteo de Luca arrived with Isabella Romano at exactly midnight, because Sophia had chosen midnight on purpose. Drama had always been one of Sophia's favorite weapons. She loved stages, mirrors, entrances, audiences. Even in Betrayal, she wanted lighting. Isabella stepped from the black car with her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The building loomed above them, silent and enormous, every dark window watching. Matteo stood beside her, dressed in black, calm on the surface and lethal underneath. He had argued against bringing her until the very last second. Isabella had refused to stay behind until he finally understood she was not walking into the opera house because Sophia demanded it. She was walking in because Luca was inside. Because the frightened boy who might be her brother, the boy who had reached for her in a house full of secrets, the boy Matteo loved more than power, was waiting somewhere beyond those doors. Matteo turned to her before they entered. Stay behind me. Isabella exhaled slowly. You know I hate when you say that. I know. And you say it anyway. His eyes held hers. Always. The word should have annoyed her. Instead, it steadied her. They entered together. The main lobby smelled of wet stone, old wood, and dust. Their footsteps echoed too loudly across the floor. Above them, broken chandeliers hung like dead stars. No guards were visible, no movement, no Luca. Isabella's stomach tightened. Matteo lifted one hand slightly, and somewhere outside, though hidden from sight, Dante's teams waited. Sophia had demanded no guards inside. Matteo had honored the wording, not the spirit. He had men on rooftops, exits, underground passages, adjacent buildings, and every road leading away from the opera house. Sophia thought she had created a trap. Matteo had turned the entire city block into one. Yet Isabella knew Sophia was not stupid. That frightened her more. They reached the auditorium doors. They opened by themselves. Inside, a single spotlight illuminated the stage. Beneath it stood Sophia Moretti holding Luca by the shoulders. Luca was alive, unhurt, pale with fear, but alive. Relief nearly took Isabella's knees out. Matteo stopped beside her, and for the first time since she met him, she felt pure violence roll off him like heat. Let him go. Sophia smiled. She wore a white silk dress, flawless makeup, diamond earrings, and the expression of a woman who believed damage could still be elegant. You always were impatient. Luca looked at Matteo. Dad. Matteo's voice changed instantly. I'm here. The boy's eyes moved to Isabella. Isabella. The sound of her name, in his frightened voice, almost broke her. She stepped forward before Matteo could stop her. I'm here too. Sophia's eyes glittered. How sweet. The waitress plays mother, sister, savior. Such range. Isabella forced herself not to react. Sophia wanted emotion. She wanted chaos. She wanted them careless. Matteo took one step forward. The records. Sophia laughed. Still pretending this is about records? She tilted her head toward Luca. This is about legacy. From the shadows behind the stage, a screen descended. Old footage flickered to life. The hospital storm, maternity wing chaos, Elena Romano being wheeled into surgery, Sophia entering restricted areas, nurses exchanging files, a newborn wrapped in blue. Isabella's breath caught. Sophia let the video play just long enough to hurt them, then paused it on the image of the baby bracelet. Romano, male infant. There he is, Sophia said softly. The little accident that ruined everything. Matteo's voice became ice. Careful. Sophia smiled at him. Or what? You'll kill me in front of your son? Luca flinched. Matteo saw it. Isabella saw it. Sophia saw it too and looked delighted. Isabella stepped forward again, her voice surprisingly calm. Why? Sophia's attention shifted to her. Why steal him? Sophia's smile faded slightly. For the first time, something real appeared beneath the performance. Bitterness. Because Elena Romano had what I needed. A baby? Isabella asked. A bloodline. Silence settled over the ruined theater. Sophia continued, no longer smiling. Elena's child carried inheritance rights tied to the old Romano de Luca trust. The kind of trust men like Matteo pretended not to care about while building empires on family legitimacy. Matteo's jaw tightened. You stole a newborn for voting rights. Sophia's eyes flashed. I stole survival. The word echoed through the auditorium. Do you know what your family does to women who are useful until they are not? I was promised power, marriage, position. Then your father questioned my bloodline. Your council questioned my loyalty. And suddenly I was decorative. Elena's child gave me leverage. Luca gave me a place no one could remove me from. Isabella stared at her in horror. He was a baby. Sophia's gaze snapped toward her, and I kept him alive. The words struck the air like a slap. Isabella's anger rose so fast she almost shook. You stole him from his mother. His mother was dying. You stole him from his sister. Sophia's face changed. That hit? Good. Isabella stepped closer. You watched me for years. You knew who I was. You knew my mother died without ever knowing where her son went. You let me grow up grieving a life I didn't even know had been taken from me. Sophia's expression hardened. You should be grateful. He grew up in luxury. Isabella's voice cracked with fury. He grew up inside a lie. Luca began crying silently. Matteo moved one step, but Sophia's grip tightened on the boy's shoulders. No closer. Matteo stopped. The restraint visibly cost him. Sophia looked pleased again. Now here is what happens. I leave with Luca. Matteo keeps his empire. Isabella gets the truth. Everyone lives. Matteo stared at her. No. Sophia's smile vanished. Excuse me? No. One word. Final. Sophia laughed once, disbelieving. You don't have a choice. Matteo's eyes became terrifyingly calm. You never understood that boy. He looked at Luca. Do you want to go with her? Luca shook his head immediately, tears falling. No. Sophia's fingers tightened. Children don't choose. Isabella's voice came sharp. They do when adults stop using them. Sophia turned toward her, hatred naked now. You think he belongs to you because of blood? Isabella's answer came without hesitation. No. I think he belongs to himself. But I love him because of blood and because of choice. The word love seemed to shake Luca harder than fear had. His eyes locked onto Isabella. Matteo heard it too. His entire expression shifted for one heartbeat. Then Sophia made her mistake. She looked away from Luca to sneer at Isabella. Luca bit her hand. Hard. Sophia screamed and released him. Matteo moved like a shadow unleashed. In the same instant, Isabella ran forward as Luca bolted toward her. Gunfire cracked from the side balcony, but Matteo was already between the shooter and them. Dante's men stormed the opera house from every entrance. The hidden trap reversed itself in seconds. Sofia stumbled backward as guards flooded the stage. Enzo Bellini tried to escape through the orchestra pit and was caught before reaching the stairs. Two of Rinaldi's men dropped their weapons. Another fired once before Dante took him down. Isabella grabbed Luca and pulled him into her arms, turning her body around him exactly as Matteo had done for her without thinking. He clung to her, sobbing. "I've got you," she whispered. "I've got you." Matteo reached them seconds later. His hands moved over Luca's face, shoulders, hair, checking for injuries with desperate precision. "Are you hurt?" Luca shook his head. Then Matteo's gaze moved to Isabella. "You?" She shook her head too. Only then did he breathe. Sofia was forced to her knees by Dante's men. Her elegance had cracked. Blood marked her hand where Luca had bitten her. Her hair had fallen loose, yet she still looked at Matteo with hatred more than fear. "You think this ends me?" She spat. Matteo stood slowly. The father disappeared. The Mafia boss returned. "No." Sofia's smile flickered. "No? This ends the version of you that was protected by my name." Dante placed a folder in Matteo's hand. Sofia's expression changed when she saw it. Matteo opened it calmly. "Your accounts are frozen. Rinaldi's transport routes were seized 1 hour ago. The doctor who altered the records gave testimony. The nurse gave testimony. Enzo gave us enough to bury 3 families." Sofia went pale. Matteo continued, voice quiet and merciless. "You kidnapped my son. You stole Elena Romano's child. You orchestrated and attempted poisoning. You murdered witnesses. You used Isabella's life as bait." He stepped closer. "You are no longer Sofia Moretti. You are no one." The words destroyed her more completely than shouting could have. In their world, losing a name meant losing shelter, money, protection, allies, and fear. Sofia understood. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. Then Luca spoke from Isabella's arms. "I want to go home." Matteo immediately turned away from Sofia, as if she no longer existed. That was her real punishment. Not his anger, his indifference. He crossed to Luca and Isabella. For one suspended second, the 3 of them stood beneath the broken opera house spotlight, the stolen son, the lost sister, the father who chose him. Matteo crouched in front of Luca. "We're going home." Luca looked at Isabella. "With her?" Matteo's eyes lifted to Isabella, and what she saw there made her heart ache. Not command, not possession, hope, if she chooses. Isabella swallowed through tears. Choice again, always choice. She looked at Luca, then Matteo, then Sofia being dragged away in the background, still shouting threats no one cared to hear. "Yes," Isabella whispered. "With me." Back at the mansion, near dawn, the full truth finally arrived from the original records recovered from Sofia's private files. Luca de Luca was Matteo's biological son. His mother was Elena Romano, Isabella's mother, who had been used in a secret surrogacy arrangement concealed by Sofia and later erased after the accident. Elena had died believing her baby had not survived. Sofia had claimed the child to secure her place in the De Luca empire. Isabella read the documents in silence. Grief came first, then rage, then something softer when Luca, half asleep on the couch beside her, curled into her side as though his body already knew the truth. He was Matteo's son. He was her brother. He was the child 2 worlds had tried to use and 2 wounded people now loved enough to protect. Matteo stood near the fireplace watching them. Isabella looked up at him. "What happens now?" His answer came quietly. "Now everyone who hurt him pays." She believed him. But more than that, she believed the second truth in his eyes. Everyone who hurt her would pay too. The family he chose. The morning after the opera house, Sicily learned what happened when Matteo de Luca stopped protecting the names of people who had mistaken his restraint for weakness. By sunrise, every associate connected to Sofia Moretti's conspiracy received the same message in different forms. Accounts frozen, properties seized, shipments intercepted, political protections withdrawn, Contracts canceled, guards reassigned, doors closed. Men who had once smiled at Sophia's table suddenly found themselves unable to reach her, unable to access money, unable to escape the evidence Matteo had spent days collecting while pretending to walk into her trap. Rinaldi's roots collapsed before breakfast. Enzo Bellini disappeared into custody with enough documented betrayal attached to his name to ruin 3 generations of alliances. The doctor who altered the hospital records signed a confession. The nurse who had hidden under a false name was placed under protection. Sophia herself was held in a secure wing beneath Matteo's estate, not because he owed her mercy, but because he intended every truth to be exposed properly, publicly, permanently. Isabella Romano watched it unfold from the quiet side of the mansion, holding a sleeping Luca against her while the world outside burned in controlled flames. The boy had cried himself to sleep shortly after dawn, one hand clutching Matteo's sleeve and the other tangled in Isabella's sweater, as if his small body had already decided what his frightened mind could not yet understand. He belonged to both of them now, not as property, not as leverage, not as an heir, as family. That word still frightened Isabella. Family had always meant loss to her. Her mother gone, her father absent, her brother older, distant, and sick through most of childhood. The possibility that Luca was her mother's lost child made grief and love twist together until she could barely separate them. When the final DNA confirmation arrived shortly after noon, the room went utterly silent. Matteo, Isabella, Maria, Dante, the family attorney, and a private doctor gathered inside the library while Luca slept upstairs under guard. The doctor opened the report with trembling professionalism and read the results aloud. Luca de Luca was the biological son of Matteo de Luca. Luca de Luca carried direct maternal DNA linked to Elena Romano. Luca de Luca was Isabella Romano's half-brother. For several seconds, no one breathed. Isabella stared at the report without seeing it. She had expected the words, feared them, longed for them. Still, hearing them spoken aloud broke something open inside her. Her mother's baby had lived. Her little brother had lived. 9 years of his life had been stolen, but he was alive. Upstairs, probably curled beneath a blanket with superhero drawings beside his bed, he was alive. Matteo turned toward her first. He did not speak. He simply offered his hand. Isabella stared at it, then placed her fingers in his. The gesture was small, but it held her together. Maria began sobbing quietly. Dante cleared his throat and looked away. The attorney tried to continue discussing inheritance implications until Matteo's stare silenced him completely. Later, Matteo said, "This is not a business matter." Isabella looked at him then, really looked at him, and understood that he meant it. In his world, bloodlines were power. But in this room, Luca was not a claim. He was a child. Their child, in different ways neither of them could fully explain yet. That evening, Matteo convened the council. Not the hidden criminal kind of meeting whispered about in restaurants, but a formal gathering of family attorneys, business trustees, senior associates, household leaders, and every person whose silence had once protected Sophia. The grand hall filled slowly. Marble floors reflected expensive shoes. Chandeliers burned overhead. Guards lined the walls. At the front of the room stood Matteo, Isabella, and Luca. The boy clung tightly to Isabella's hand until Matteo gently rested a hand on his shoulder. The sight alone shifted the room. People whispered, then stopped. When Matteo looked up, he did not raise his voice. He never needed to. For 9 years, my son was used as a weapon by people who believed blood mattered more than love, documents mattered more than truth, and power mattered more than a child's life. Silence settled hard. Isabella felt Luca tremble, so she squeezed his hand. Matteo continued, "Today, that ends." Dante stepped forward and displayed the evidence. Hospital footage, altered records, Sophia's files, DNA results, witness statements, proof of the attempted poisoning, proof of Luca's kidnapping, proof of Rinaldi's role, proof of Marco's involvement, proof of the murders committed to erase witnesses. One by one, the lies became visible. The room changed as truth filled it. Some faces showed horror, some shame, some fear. Matteo watched all of them, memorizing every reaction. Then he turned slightly toward Isabella. Isabella Romano saved my son's life before she knew he shared her blood. The words struck her harder than expected. Every eye turned toward her. Months ago, even hours ago, that kind of attention would have made her shrink. She would have remembered cruel jokes from the restaurant, Marco's contempt, co-workers laughing at her body, customers seeing only a waitress. But Luca's hand was in hers. Matteo stood beside her. Her mother had lost a child, and Isabella had found him. She lifted her chin. Matteo's voice softened only enough for her to hear the difference. She is Luca's sister. A ripple passed through the room. She is under my protection. Another ripple, sharper this time, and anyone who treats her as anything less than family will answer to me. The warning was unmistakable. Isabella's breath caught. Luca looked up at Matteo, then at her, confused and emotional. Does that mean she stays? The question escaped him in front of everyone. A few people softened. Isabella almost broke. Matteo crouched in front of Luca, unconcerned by the council watching. That is Isabella's choice. Luca turned to her. His eyes were wide, vulnerable, terrified of another loss. Isabella knelt too, bringing herself level with him. I don't know everything yet, she whispered. I don't know how to be a sister overnight. I don't know how to fit into this world. Luca's chin trembled. She smiled through tears. But I know I'm not leaving you. He threw himself into her arms, and the entire grand hall seemed to hold its breath. Isabella hugged him tightly, eyes squeezed shut, feeling 9 stolen years press against her heart. When she opened them, Matteo was watching her with an expression he could no longer hide. It was not just gratitude. It had not been gratitude for days. After the council ended, Sophia's punishment was finalized. She was stripped of every family name, every business claim, every trust advantage she had stolen, every protected property, every account tied to the De Luca network. Her confession, records, and crimes were delivered to the authorities and to every family she had manipulated. Rinaldi lost shipping access, political coverage, and the men he trusted most. Marco's involvement was publicly exposed. His betrayal would no longer be remembered as a dead man's secret, but as the act of a coward who sold a woman who had once loved him and helped target a child. Every person who mocked Isabella at La Stella d'Oro suddenly found themselves answering questions about how easily they had allowed a substitute server near Luca's table. The manager lost his position. The kitchen assistant was arrested. The hostess who had laughed at Isabella begged for a reference and received silence. Matteo never needed to shout. He simply removed protection, and the world did the rest. Yet the most important healing happened quietly, far from council rooms and punishment lists. Days passed. Luca began sleeping through the night again. Not always, but sometimes. He started calling Isabella Isa when he was happy and my sister when he wanted to make her cry. He asked whether their mother had liked chocolate. Isabella told him she had. He asked whether Elena would have loved him. Isabella answered yes so quickly that Luca cried, and then laughed because she cried too. Matteo watched these moments from doorways and terraces, never intruding unless invited, always present. One afternoon, Isabella found him in the garden teaching Luca how to hold a wooden practice sword. Absolutely not, she said immediately. Matteo looked up. It's wood. He is 8. Luca grinned. I'm almost 9. That is not a legal defense. Matteo's mouth curved. You've become very authoritative for someone who arrived here accidentally. Isabella folded her arms. I saved your son from a dessert. Show respect. Luca burst out laughing. Matteo did too, quietly, but enough that Isabella saw it. Enough that something inside her chest warmed dangerously. Later that evening, after Luca went to bed, Isabella found Matteo on the terrace overlooking the sea. The same terrace where everything had begun to shift between them. The night air smelled of salt and lemon blossoms. For once, no alarm sounded. No enemies were expected. No messages waited. Only silence, stars, and the man who had turned her life into danger and then somehow into home. You punished them all, she said softly. Matteo looked out at the water. Not all. Isabella turned toward him. Who is left? His gaze moved to her. Anyone who ever made you believe you were not worth choosing. Her heart stumbled. Matteo. Marco is dead, so he cannot hear it. The restaurant has already learned it. Sophia will live with it. He stepped closer. But you still haven't. Isabella's throat tightened. Haven't what? Understood that you were never the substitute. Never the accident. Never the woman people settled for when they couldn't have someone better. The words struck too deep. She looked away quickly, but Matteo gently caught her chin, giving her enough time to refuse. She didn't. His thumb rested lightly against her skin. You saved my son. You protected him. You gave him a truth without making him feel unloved. You stood inside a room full of powerful men and did not shrink. His voice lowered. Do you know what that makes you? Isabella whispered. Exhausted? His mouth almost curved. Mine, if you choose. The world seemed to stop. Not because of possession alone, but because of the last three words. If you choose. Matteo de Luca. A man who could command rooms, ruin enemies, and close borders with a phone call, was offering her choice. Isabella looked up at him, heart pounding. Is this why you refused to let me leave? No. His answer came immediately. At first, I refused because you were in danger. And now? His eyes darkened. Now, I am the one in danger. Her breath caught. Matteo stepped closer, but did not kiss her. Not yet. Because if you leave now, Isabella, this house will survive. Luca will survive. I will survive. His voice turned rough, but it will feel like someone took the light out of every room you walk through. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. That is the most dramatic thing you've ever said. I live in Sicily. Drama is expected. She laughed through the tears, and the sound broke the tension between them just enough for him to smile. Then he rested his forehead against hers. Stay because you want to. Not because Luca needs you. Not because I protect you. Not because Sophia stole something from both of us. His voice softened. Stay because this can be your home too. Isabella closed her eyes. Home. The word terrified her, tempted her, healed her. Behind them, inside the mansion, Luca's drawing still hung on the library wall. 3 figures with shields, standing together against evil desert monsters. A boy, his father, and the sister who saved him. Isabella opened her eyes and whispered, I want to stay. Matteo exhaled like a man who had been waiting for a verdict. Then he kissed her. Not violently, not as a claim forced upon her. He kissed her like restraint finally surrendering to tenderness, like a man who had held back because she deserved the choice, like someone who had found not weakness, but home. When he pulled away, his hand remained against her cheek. Good, he said quietly. Isabella smiled. That's all? His eyes warmed. For now. That sounds threatening. It is a promise. And somewhere in the quiet hallway behind them, Luca peeked around the corner, saw them holding each other, smiled sleepily, and whispered to Maria, I told Dad she should stay. Maria wiped her eyes and whispered back, Yes, little prince. You did. The family that stayed. The first peaceful morning after the truth felt almost unreal. Sunlight spilled over the Sicilian coast, turning the sea beyond the De Luca mansion into liquid gold, and for the first time since Isabella Romano had been brought through the gates, no alarms sounded, no encrypted messages arrived, no guards ran through marble corridors, and no one whispered Sophia's name like a curse. The house breathed. That was the only way Isabella could describe it. The mansion that had once felt cold, dangerous, and too perfect to be alive now carried softer sounds. Maria humming in the kitchen, Luca laughing somewhere near the garden, Matteo speaking quietly with Dante instead of issuing orders sharp enough to cut stone. Isabella stood on the balcony of the guest suite that no longer felt like a guest suite and watched the morning unfold with a strange ache in her chest. The ache was not fear, not grief exactly. It was the feeling of surviving a storm and realizing the world had changed while you were still inside it. Behind her, someone knocked once. She turned. Luca opened the door before she could answer, still in pajamas, hair messy, clutching the superhero drawing from the night before. You said pancakes today, he announced. Isabella smiled. Good morning to you too. Good morning, pancakes? She laughed, and the sound seemed to startle even her. Yes, pancakes. Luca grinned, then hesitated at the doorway, as if suddenly remembering something important. His smile softened. Are you still staying? Isabella crossed the room and knelt in front of him. Even after everything Matteo had said, even after the council recognized her as his sister, even after the DNA results confirmed what her heart had already begun to know, Luca still asked the question like a child who had learned too early that people could vanish. Isabella gently brushed his hair back. Yes. His eyes searched her face. Tomorrow too? Tomorrow too. And after tomorrow? Her throat tightened. And after tomorrow? Luca threw his arms around her neck so quickly she nearly lost balance. She hugged him back, closing her eyes. He smelled like sleep, soap, and little boy warmth. Her brother. Her mother's lost baby. Matteo's son. The child Sophia had stolen, used, and almost destroyed, now safe in her arms. You can call me sister if you want, she whispered. Luca pulled back, thinking very seriously. Can I call you Isa? She laughed through the sudden tears. Yes. And sister when I want something? Absolutely not. He grinned. Dad says negotiation is important. Your father is a terrible influence. A low voice came from the doorway. I heard that. Isabella looked up. Matteo stood there in a dark shirt with rolled sleeves, no jacket, no tie, no armor except the natural authority he could never fully remove. He looked less like a feared mafia boss in that moment, and more like a man standing outside a room he hoped he was allowed to enter. Luca immediately released Isabella and ran to him. Pancakes. Matteo nodded gravely. Apparently. Isa said you're a terrible influence. Matteo's eyes lifted to Isabella. There was warmth there now. Open, dangerous, gentle. She is often brave when I'm not holding coffee. Isabella stood, cheeks warming despite herself. I stand by my statement. Matteo's mouth curved slightly. Noted. The legal confirmation happened 2 days later inside the same grand hall where secrets had once been exposed like wounds. This time, the long table held no evidence of betrayal, no hospital footage, no forged records, no photos of stolen babies or dead witnesses. Instead, it held official documents, amended birth records, guardianship protections, inheritance corrections, and a formal recognition of Isabella Romano as Luca's maternal sister and surviving biological family through Elena Romano. Matteo had insisted the language be clear, not decorative, not symbolic, legal, permanent, unbreakable. Isabella signed with a hand that trembled only once. Luca signed a child-friendly version Maria had prepared, mostly ceremonial, with his name written in large, uneven letters and a tiny shield drawn beside it. Matteo watched the boy's signature as though it mattered more than any contract he had ever signed. When the final document was sealed, Maria cried openly. Dante cleared his throat 3 times and pretended dust existed in a spotless hall. Luca looked up at Isabella. So now it's official? Isabella nodded. Very official. He grinned. Good. Then he turned to Matteo. Does that mean she has to stay forever? Matteo looked at Isabella, and the room seemed to quiet around them. No, he said. It means she can stay because she chooses to. Isabella's heart turned over. Choice. Again and again, Matteo kept giving her back what Sophia, Marco, and fear had tried to steal. After the legal ceremony, the punishments became public enough that no enemy could pretend not to understand. Sophia Moretti was stripped of the name she had weaponized, removed from every De Luca-linked trust, exposed to the families she had manipulated, and handed over with records strong enough to bury her crimes for years. Carlo Rinaldi's network collapsed under simultaneous raids, frozen accounts, and allies who abandoned him the moment Matteo withdrew fear from the board and replaced it with proof. Enzo Bellini testified in exchange for survival, which in their world meant a cage rather than a grave. The kitchen assistant, the manager, and every person at La Stella d'Oro who had helped create the opening for Luca's poisoning faced consequences. Some legal, some financial, some social. The hostess who had mocked Isabella tried to call 3 times. Isabella did not answer. Marco's betrayal was documented and buried with him, not out of respect, But because Isabella refused to let his final act define her life, Matteo wanted harsher revenge. Isabella knew because she saw it in his eyes every time Marco's name appeared. But when she asked him to let that piece of the past die, he did. Not because he was merciful, because she asked. That mattered more than he admitted. Weeks passed, and healing arrived in small, imperfect ways. Luca began calling Isabella Isa in the mornings, and my sister whenever he wanted to show her off. He asked endless questions about Elena Romano. Isabella answered what she could, and promised to discover the rest with him. Together, they visited Elena's grave for the first time after the truth. Matteo came too, standing a few steps behind them with quiet respect, while Isabella placed white flowers beside the stone. Luca held her hand. "Do you think she knows me now?" he whispered. Isabella knelt beside him. "I think she always did." Luca leaned against her shoulder and cried softly. Matteo turned away, giving them privacy. But Isabella saw the way his hand tightened at his side. Later, in the car, Luca fell asleep between them, his head on Isabella's lap and one hand gripping Matteo's sleeve. Neither adult moved for nearly an hour. Some bonds were too fragile to disturb and too powerful to deny. The mansion changed with them. The library wall filled with Luca's drawings, Matteo with a shield, Isabella with a cape, Maria with a rolling pin, Dante as a very angry dragon, and Sophia as a defeated evil queen trapped behind bars. Isabella laughed so hard at that one that Dante framed it. Matteo pretended not to approve but left it hanging. Maria taught Isabella family recipes Elena had once loved. Isabella taught Luca how to recognize allergy symptoms without making him afraid of food. Matteo bought every medical device recommended by 3 specialists, and then 2 extra because Matteo considered moderation an illness. Isabella called him impossible. He looked pleased. Their romance unfolded not like fire but like something stronger, a flame protected from wind. Matteo never rushed her, never treated gratitude like consent, never confused protection with ownership. Yet his possessiveness remained unmistakable in quieter ways. A guard assigned when she went into town, a hand at her back when strangers looked too long. Coffee appearing before she asked. Her old apartment cleared only after she approved every box. The restaurant where she had been humiliated quietly losing its elite clientele after Matteo redirected reservations elsewhere. "You ruined them," Isabella said one evening after hearing the news. Matteo looked up from his papers. "I did no such thing. You told half of Sicily to stop eating there. I made recommendations. Threatening recommendations? Influential ones." She tried to glare. Failed. He stood and crossed the study toward her, eyes warm with the kind of quiet intensity that still made her breath catch. "They laughed while you were hurt. I survived." "Yes," his fingers brushed a strand of hair from her face. "But surviving does not mean they deserved access to you afterward." That was Matteo's love language, Isabella realized. Protection spoken like strategy, tenderness hidden inside control, devotion delivered through action before words. But the words came too. On a warm evening 2 months after the opera house, Matteo hosted a private celebration on the terrace overlooking the Mediterranean. Not a council meeting, not a warning, not a business event, a family celebration. Lanterns glowed above long tables filled with food. Music drifted through the night air. Luca ran between guests with the reckless joy of a child who finally believed no one was leaving. Maria wore blue because Luca said it made her look like a fancy queen. Dante stood near the terrace steps pretending not to enjoy himself. Isabella wore a deep red dress Maria had chosen and spent most of the evening feeling both beautiful and terrified by being seen. Matteo found her near the balcony, watching the sea. "Hiding?" he asked. "Observing. You always say that when you're hiding. You always say, 'Stay behind me' when you're worried." His mouth curved. "Fair." For a moment they stood together in comfortable silence. Then Matteo turned slightly, and Isabella immediately felt the change in him. The air seemed to tighten. Not with danger this time. With intention. "Isabella." Her heart began to pound. "Yes?" He reached into his jacket and removed a small velvet box. Everything inside her went still. Behind them, Luca suddenly stopped running. Maria covered her mouth. Dante muttered something that sounded suspiciously like finally. Matteo opened the box. Inside was a ring unlike anything Isabella had expected. Elegant, not flashy, with a small, hidden engraving inside the band. Family is chosen every day. Tears filled her eyes before he spoke. You came into my life because someone tried to hurt my son, Matteo said quietly. You stayed because you were brave enough to love him even when the truth was painful. You gave him back a family. You gave this house back laughter. His voice lowered. You gave me back something I thought my world had killed. Isabella could barely breathe. Matteo stepped closer. I will not ask you to belong to me as a possession. I will ask you to build something with me. A home for Luca. A future for yourself. A life where no one gets to make you feel unwanted again. His eyes held hers. Powerful and vulnerable at once. Isabella Romano, will you marry me? For 1 second, all she could hear was the sea. Then Luca shouted from behind them, Say yes! Laughter broke across the terrace. Isabella laughed through tears. Matteo closed his eyes briefly as if praying for patience. Luca. What? You took too long. Isabella wiped her cheek and looked at the boy who was her brother, then at the man who had chosen him every day, then back at the ring that did not feel like a chain, but a door. Yes, she whispered. Matteo's expression changed completely. Relief. Love. Possession softened by gratitude. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her, while the terrace erupted in applause. Luca cheered the loudest, then shoved himself between them and demanded a family hug. Matteo sighed dramatically but pulled him in. Isabella wrapped her arms around both of them, laughing and crying at the same time. Above the Sicilian coast, lanterns swayed in the warm night air, and the house behind them no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like a home. Years later, people would still tell the story of the waitress who saved the Mafia boss's son and was never allowed to leave. They would whisper about Sofia's betrayal, the stolen child, the hospital records, the opera house trap, and the night Matteo de Luca destroyed an empire to bring one boy home. But Isabella would remember the smaller truths. Luca's hand searching for hers after a nightmare, Matteo giving her choice when everyone else tried to use her, Maria crying over signed documents, pancakes in a mansion that once knew only silence, a ring engraved with the promise that family is chosen every day. And whenever Luca asked her to tell the story again, Isabella would smile and begin at the only place that mattered. Once, in a restaurant full of people who looked right through me, a little boy needed help, and by saving him I found my way home. The end. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Tell us in the comments. At what moment did you realize Sofia was hiding the truth? Was Matteo right to destroy everything to protect Luca? And if you were Isabella, would you have stayed? Your comments help decide which story comes next. And remember, sometimes family isn't the one you're born with. It's the one that chooses you every single day. See you in the next story.